Hello and welcome. My name is Melissa Galasso, and I'm excited to be with you today to talk to you about our newest attest standard, SSAE 22. SSAE 22 was issued in December of 2020. Now, this is the culmination of a series of SSAEs that are updating and modernizing the attest standards. We have already seen the issuance of SSAE 19, which updated the AUPs and provided us some changes regarding assertions as well as who could prepare the procedures. After that, we had SSAE 21, which addressed examination engagements and provided us a new type of service. So now we have assertion-based examinations as well as direct examinations when the client does not provide an assertion as to the subject matter. And so last in the series is SSAE 22, and that is going to impact review engagement. So review engagements are very interesting. Here we're trying to, again, provide limited assurance on a subject matter other than a historical financial statement. And so this is part of that overall update. They had kind of put this out there as one big exposure draft and kind of then broke it up into smaller pieces upon issuance, really addressing each individual type of engagement separately. And so when you look at this standard, there's a lot of meat to it simply because they are trying to bring consistency. If you look at the markup, some of the comments on the markup are just to make it consistent with the other changes they made in other sections. So when you're the third in line, there is just a little bit of consistency consideration. So you'll notice a lot of the changes that were made in SSAE 21 to the ATC section 105, which is our general rules, underlying subject matter information, all of that is carried over into the SSAE 22. So a lot of those changes will carry forward. In fact, you can't actually adopt 22 unless you adopt those general standards from 21. So they do have a lot of, again, relationship between them. So they are issuing them separately, but they do want us to pay attention to the fact that, this is a series of items and there's a lot of different pieces to it. So the first thing you're going to notice, consistent with SARS 25. So again, when we think about this, we have the attest standards, but we also have SARS, which are our reviews and our comps. When we're dealing with financial statements, when they issued SARS 25, they permitted an adverse conclusion. And that was really at the time kind of revolutionary. Prior to the SARS 25, you were not allowed to indicate that there was a material misstatement in the financial statements. And that was because we thought that that would rise to the level of an opinion, and a review does not have enough evidence. So while you have sufficient appropriate review evidence, not enough to give an opinion. However, if you know that there's an error that's pervasive and material, they are now going to permit the expression of a review where we would have an adverse conclusion. Well, consistent with this, we are not looking at financial statements. We're looking at other subject matter and different criteria. But now in the attest standards, we will permit the issuance of an adverse conclusion. So when the subject matter is materially and pervasively not in accordance with the criteria, we would be able to issue an adverse conclusion. So now I think this one's really interesting because when we think about reviews, we have all different types of reviews. We have interim reviews done under the SSAEs. We have reviews done under the SARS when it is for a financial statement. And then we have reviews done under the attestation standards, which are for reviews of things other than historical financial information. So when we're going through this, I think it does kind of bring it all together. It's a lot of terminology and a lot of pieces, but definitely, I think, a very important element. So one other thing that's interesting here is that when you're doing a review for a financial statement, right? Think about that. We have prior year, we have current year, we can do analytics, we can do some information, we can look at trends, we can look at ratios, and it's not that bad. So our analytical procedures are pretty easy to figure out when you're doing a review of a financial statement. However, when you're trying to get limited assurance about something that's not a financial statement, right? So it could be census data, it could be all kinds of different things. doing an analytic might not make sense, especially if it's not necessarily something that's quantitative. And so while we're still issuing limited assurance, the standard really focuses in on figuring out what is the area for risk. And it removes the explicit requirement that a review is typically analytics and inquiry. And so that works great when you're doing a review of financial statements. It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense when you don't have financial statements as the subject matter. And so instead, they're really focusing on a more risk-based approach. Where's your higher risk of material misstatement of the subject matter? What procedures can we do? Again, without rising to the level of an audit, but to be responsive. So it clarifies basically that the objective of review is to obtain limited assurance instead of being an exercise in performing analytical procedures and inquiry. So backing off of the inquiry and analytics as the primary procedures and just focusing on this concept of limited assurance. As a result, they really think about this as, well, what is the subject matter? So it clarifies that the nature, the timing, and the extent of the procedures are going to be affected by the extent to which the responsible party has measured or evaluated the subject matter against the criteria. And so this is more of an act of professional skepticism and professional judgment. And so we have to figure out what procedures we need to select and apply procedures to accumulate sufficient appropriate evidence. And again, it's for a conclusion, limited assurance. And so I think those are going to be our biggest areas, but you even notice it in the report. So in the unmodified, so this is again an unmodified conclusion, your plain Jane report here, you'll notice that it starts off with independent accountant's report. And then we have reviewed and then again, you have to insert the subject matter. And then in accordance with, it goes through this, and then it says XYZ's management is responsible for, and then you would indicate the subject matter in accordance with and then you'd identify the criteria. Our responsibility is to express a conclusion based on our review. Then when you look through here, you're going to see some of the additional changes that are really being made here. So the review is conducted in accordance with the attestation standards. And then it says we plan and perform the review to obtain limited assurance about whether any material modifications should be made. And then we'd identify the subject matter in accordance with the criteria. And so now you'll notice a change in the verbiage around procedures. So the procedures performed in a review vary in nature and timing. So again, really focus on this concept of we don't have standard procedures in this area. And then as a result, they're substantially less in extent than an examination, the objective of which is to obtain reasonable assurance about whether and then again, so kind of goes through this and then says we do not express an opinion. It also includes the statement from SAS 134, which is now included in the SARs and all SSAEs, that we are required to be independent and to meet our other ethical responsibilities in accordance with the relevant ethical requirements. So SAS 134 introduces this for audits. SARs 25 introduces it for review engagements. The AUPs as well as the examinations also include this language. And so now all items where we're required to be independent have an explicit statement in the report of independence and ethical requirements. So I think that's important to put out there. What I thought was really interesting was the additional language regarding the description of the work being performed. And so now you would include a description of the work performed as a basis, because again, it's not necessarily analytics, it's not necessarily inquiry. So we do have to describe what that's going to look like. So I think what's really important about the report here, again, it really focuses on the procedures being dependent, and then really focusing on the limited nature of the work here. And it's less than an examination, but we don't know exactly what procedures we're going to do. So when we're thinking about that summary, basically we're just trying to help the user understand what is the basis for our conclusion. So in this area, it could be as brief as the procedures we perform were based on our professional judgment and consisted primarily of analytical procedures and inquiries, right? So if that is it, it could also be more detailed, but basically this is an objective way of explaining to the users what exactly was done, because the subject matter is not a financial statement. And we don't necessarily, we can't do trend, we can't do certain analytics. We want it to be concise in a way that's not vague or ambiguous, but also not in a way that's overstated or embellished. So it's a nice balance as we go through here. And so what are some of the factors you would consider in determining what level of detail? Well, the circumstances for the particular entity, the specific engagement circumstances, and then the user's expectation. So when we think about this, we want to make sure that we're providing information that's useful to the user so they understand what we did to get that limited assurance, but not necessarily to overwhelm them. So as part of this update, the practitioner's report for this will be for practitioner's report dated on or after June 15, 2022. Remember, in an attest standard, we don't have a financial statement, so there's not a period end. So it's just a boom, line in the sand. Once we get to June 15, 2022, our new reports start using this, and we should be using the appropriate procedure. So it's important to plan our engagements accordingly. So early implementation is only permitted if you adopt the 105 section that's in SSAE number 21. So that is it for today's update. Hopefully it was helpful to you to understand what's going on in the attestation world. And I hope to see you on a future Nano Learning. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.